Good morning, guys. Today we are looking at lesson 14, association between categorical variables. All right, and this is the last lesson in this module. All right, so we're going to begin with the classwork example 1. It says, suppose a random group of people are surveyed about their use of smartphones. The results of the surveys are summarized in the tables below. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to take a minute and make sure that we understand what this table is showing us. All right, so on the left side, we see that we're looking at smartphone usage by gender. So whether you have a smartphone and whether you're a boy or a girl. And then on this side over here on the right, it says whether you have a smartphone, and then it's doing the categories by your age. So if you're under 40 years old or if you're over 40, okay? All right, so take a minute and just look at that data. Make sure you understand what's going on there. So as we're looking at this data, we can see that 75% of our population are using cell phones or smartphones, and 25% of our population is not using cell phones, and that's when we're looking at gender. So that's telling us that if we have 100 boys and girls, okay, of which 40 are boys and 60 are girls, 75 of them do have a smartphone and 25 of them don't, okay? All right, so total in our population, we have 30 boys that have a cell phone and 10 boys that do not, for a total of 40. Females are at 45 that have a smartphone and 15 that do not, and that's a total of 60. And of course, 40 plus 60 is equal to 100. All right, now let's look at the age. All right. So we see that under 45 years old, we surveyed 50 people that were under 45. 45 of them do have a smartphone, and 5 of them do not have a smartphone. But then when we look at the population of the people that are over 40, we see that 30 of them do have smartphones and 20 of them do not. So we have a total of 100 people that we surveyed for this one. All right. So this is just asking you to look at this information. And now we're going to move on to the example number 2. So example number 2 says, suppose a sample of 400 participants, teachers and students, all right, was randomly selected from the middle schools and high schools in a large city. The participants responded to the following questions, all right? So we took 400 people, they are teachers and students. We randomly selected them. We're asking them, what type of movie do you prefer to watch? Action, drama, science, and comedy. All right, movie preference and status was recorded for each participant. All right, let's go to the next page. It says 2 variables were recorded. Are these variables categorical or numerical? All right, so remember that a numerical variable deals mainly with numbers. Numerical numbers, that makes sense, right? And categorical is more so about categories, okay? Okay, so the answer to this question is that they are categorical, all right? Because we are looking at categories. We're looking at your movie preference. We're also looking at whether you're a teacher or a student. Of course, a teacher or a student can't be a number. They can only be a category. All right. Moving on to number 2. It says the results of the survey have been summarized below. And as you can see right here, that is a total of 400 people. We see that 300 of them are students and 100 of them are teachers, okay? All right, and then it breaks it down, all right? So we have 120 students that like action, 60 that like drama, 30 for science, 90 for comedy, for a total of 300 students, okay? So that number, if you add all the way going horizontally, should equal 300. Then for teachers, you have 40 for action, 20 for drama, 10 for science fiction, and 30 for comedy. And if you add those rows across, they should be 100, okay? And then at the bottom, it just gives you the total of people that were surveyed that actually like the action movies. All right, so we have 160 out of everybody surveyed that like 400. 80 for drama, 40 for science fiction, and 120 for comedy. All right, so let's look at the question for the first one. The first question says, what proportion of participants who are teachers prefer action movies? Okay, so let me get my pencil here. Okay, so I'm looking at the number of teachers that like action movies. Well, that's 40. And I'm looking for a ratio, so that's why I put that line under the 40. All right. And so I'm also looking for the total number of teachers that were surveyed. Well, when I look at my table here, I surveyed 100 teachers. Okay. So that means 0.4 or 40%, all right, of my teachers would prefer to watch action movies. Okay, and so that's the answer for the first one. All right, I'm going to scroll down to number 2. All right, it says, what proportion of participants that are teachers prefer drama? All right, so let's look at our table. We see that 20 of our teachers like drama, and we surveyed a total of 100 teachers. So that means I'm at 0.2 or 20%. All right, so that's B. All right, for C, it says, what proportion of participants who are teachers prefer science fiction movies? Well, looking at my chart, I see that 10 of my teachers out of 100 like science fiction. So that's going to give me 0.10 or 10%. Okay. For question D, it says, what proportion of participants who are teachers prefer comedies? Well, when you look at your table, you can see that 30 of my teachers like comedy. And remember, I only looked at 100 teachers. So this is 0.3 or 30%. All right, so that's for your A, B, C, and D for number 2. All right. Moving on to the next page. All right, it says that you need to, says the answers to exercise 2 are called row relative frequencies. Notice that you divided each of the cell frequencies in the teacher row by the total for the row. Below is a blank relative frequency table. Okay. So the answers that we got for A, which is 0.40, should go in the teacher A column. For B, we should get the 0.2. For C, we should get the 0.10. And then for D, we should get the 0.3. Okay. So that's what you're going to fill in for this A, B, C, and D portion right here. Okay. And it says, find the relative frequency for the students row. Okay. All right. So you're going to fill in the chart now for the students. Okay. And I'm going to go back up so that I can see my numbers. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the students columns. Okay. So for action, I'm looking at my chart. I have 120 students that like action movies. All right. And this is out of 300 students. So 300 will be my denominator. All right. I'm going to then get me a calculator up. And when I do 120 divided by 300, I get 0.4 or 40%. Okay. All right. So then, and you guys check my work, you know, I'm liable to make a error somewhere. All right. So I'm going to bring up a calculator, and I have 120 divided by 300 equals, and I do get 0.4. All right. All right. So now I'm going to do the ones for the kids that like drama. Well, drama's going to be 60 divided by 300. Okay. And then I'm going to pull up my calculator, and I'm going to do 60 divided by 3. Let me go back. Sorry. So 60 divided by 300, and I get 0.2 or 20%. All right, so 0.2 or 20%. All right, and now I'm going to do the percentage for science fiction and comedy. So science fiction is going to be 30 over 300, which should be 10%. And the comedy is going to be 90 over 300, which is 30 or 30%. All right, and so here's the work for that one. Okay, now that we've completed all of this calculations, I want you to notice how 40 plus 20 and 10 and 30 will give us 100%, okay? 40 and 20 gives us 60, 10 gives us 70, the 30 added will be 100%, which means we've covered all of our population of teachers and all of our population of students. Same thing here, 40 and 20, 10 and 30. All right, so let's get back to the questions here. All right, so for number 4, it says, is a participant's status related to what type of movie he or she would prefer to watch? Why or why not? And then it says, discuss this with your group. So, of course, we were supposed to do this as a group, but we're just going to go through it together. When you look at the different calculations, look at your first calculations for here and here, the 20 and the 20. The 10 and the 10, and it looks like all of their relative frequencies are the same. So I would conclude that there's no association because each of the variables are pretty much similar, okay? So, and I would say that they're pretty much very similar. All right, let's go to number 5. Number 5 says, what does it mean when we say that there is no association between two variables? Well, no association just means that one category doesn't determine the other category. So for instance, whether I'm a teacher or a student, you can't tell based on this data whether I would like drama or action, science, or comedy. Same thing for the students. Because everything is so similar and they're the same, I can't tell. So there's no association between these two variables, okay? All right, let's read number 6, okay? It says, notice that the row relative frequencies for each movie type are the same for both the teacher and student's row. When this happens, we say that the two variables, movie preference and status, are not associated. Another way of thinking about this is to say that knowing if a participant is a teacher or a student provides no information about his movie preference. What does it mean if row relative frequency are not the same for all two rows? All right. So we noticed that because these are the same, we said that we couldn't tell whether you were a teacher or a student that, what your preference is. So that means if they're different, there should be an association. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, now we're going to go to number 7. And we are now going to look at the column relative frequencies, okay? So we just looked at row relative frequencies. Now we're going to look at the columns, okay? And we're going to fill in the chart. All right, it says, you can also evaluate whether two variables are associated by looking at column relative frequencies instead of row relative frequencies. A column relative frequency is a cell frequency divided by the corresponding column total. So, for instance, if we wanted to look at the students in the action, okay, we'll take the number of students that like action, and they give us this one, it's 120, divided by the total in that column. So when we add that teacher and that student, and I'm going to show you where they get this from. Go back up to this table here. All right, so you see the 120? Looking at that action column, we have 120 out of 160. And so those are the two numbers that they use. So that means in order to determine the teachers, we would do 40 over 160. All right, and so here's what I'm going to show you here. All right, so for the first one, for this one, is for the student, you should have 120 over 160, which is 0.75. All right, and this is for the student. And then for the teacher, I'm going to go ahead and tell you should have 0.25, which is going to be equal to a total of 100, okay, or 1. All right, so for the next one, for drama, all right, we're going to go back to our chart. For drama, you're going to have 60 over 80. And then for the students, you're going to have 20 over 80, okay? And then I'm going to get my calculator so that you can see. All right, and when I pull up my calculator, I have 60 divided by 80. And look at that. I get 75% again, okay? So that means in that top column, you're going to put 0.75. And then I'm going to do 20 divided by 80. And I get 25, which I already knew I was going to get 0.25 because remember, again, these are going to have to add up to 1, okay? So like 75 cents plus a quarter, it's $1, all right? And so then for science fiction, all the way across, you're going to get 30 over 40, and then 10 over 40, okay? Well, 30 over 40 is, again, going to give me 0.75, and I don't even need to calculate it because I know 3/4, which is what this pretty much reduces to, is 0.75, and then 1 over 4 is the same as a quarter, so again, I get the same numbers. All right, and so now I'm going to do the comedy, and I'm going to get 90 over 120 and 30 over 120. Well, put that in your calculator, guys, and you're going to get 0.75 again and 0.25. Okay, so that's what you're going to fill in for this next table for your column relative frequency. So all the way across the top, you should have 0.75. And then that's for the students. And all the way across for the teachers, you're going to have 0.25. Okay. All right, so your first question says, what do you notice about the column relative frequency for the 4 columns? Well, of course, we notice that they're all the same. All right, so that will be the answer for that one. Let's go to C. It says, what would you conclude about the association based on the column relative frequencies? Well, I would say this, that because they're all the same for all 4 columns, we would conclude that there is no association, okay, because they're too similar. So I can't tell again. All right, let's move on to number 3. Okay, so for example 3, we have a survey, and it says the gender for each of the 400 participants were recorded, and so we're given these facts, okay? All right, the first one says that 160 participants preferred action movies, 80 participants preferred drama, 40 participants preferred science fiction, 240 participants were females, 78 females preferred drama, 32 preferred science fiction movies, and 60 preferred action movies, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, and I want you to take this information, and I want you to fill in the chart, okay? When you unpause the video, I will show you the answers, and let's see how well you did, okay? Okay. Now, see if you got this correct. So this is what I have when I filled in the frequency table. All right, and you had to do some subtracting and kind of figuring out where everything went, okay? All right, so I'll show you one more time so that you can go ahead and copy this if you didn't get it. All right, perfect. All right, so we've completed that part. Now let's go to the next question. It says, what proportion of the participants are female? All right, so let's look at how many females we said we had, okay? So when I look at the chart, I noticed that I had a total of 240 total females. Give me a second, I gotta get some paper. Okay. All right, so I have a total of 240 females. And then how many total people did we survey? Well, 400. So this is 240 divided by 400. All right, and then I'm going to get my calculator. And 240 divided by 400 gives me 60%, or 0.6. All right, so that's what I'm going to put right here. Okay. All right, moving on to number 10. It says, if there was no association between gender and movie preference, should you expect more females than males or fewer females than males to prefer action movies? Explain. All right, well, based on looking at what we saw in the first example, if there is no association, then I would expect that more females than males would prefer more action movies because there are more females. All right. So because I have more females in my sample group, I would expect that more girls are going to prefer action movies than boys. Okay. But if there was an association, then I would probably expect that less women or fewer females are going to prefer the action movies than the males. Okay, so now for 11, it's asking us to make a row relative frequency. So remember, we're going row, not column, okay? And we're going to fill in this chart, all right? So for the first one, I'm going to look at my graph. And for females in action, I have 60 out of 240. All right, and when I do this, and I put it in my calculator, 60 divided by 240 is 0.25. All right. Now I'm going to look at my males. It's 100 divided by 160. All right. So 100. All right. Go back to my calculator. 100 divided by 160 gives me 0.625. Okay. All right, take a minute and pause the video and see if you can complete the rest of the row, and then I will give you the answers. All right, so if you've completed your relative row frequency chart, then this is what we did together, the 0.25 and the 0.625. And then you should have for drama this number here, 0.325 and 0.0125. For science, you should have 0.033 and 0.2. And then for comedy, you should have 0.392 and 0.1625. Okay, so check your work. Okay, now we are going to use this information to answer questions 12 through 15. Okay. All right, so number 12 says, if you had to predict what type of movie this person chose, what would you predict? Explain why you made this choice, okay? So it says, suppose you had to randomly pick one of the participants. All right, remember we surveyed 400 people. If you had to predict what type of movie this person chose, what would you predict? All right, so look at your chart. What would you predict? All right. And I would say that I would predict action. All right. And the reason why I would say action is because look at your percentages for action. We have 0.25 and 0.625. Well, that's major when you compare it to the drama, the science fiction, and the comedy. All right. All right, now let's look at number 13. It says, if you know that the person that you select is a female, what would you predict that her favorite type of movie is? If not, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Would you predict that her favorite type of movie is action? And then it says, if not, what would you predict? Okay, well, let's look at the females and the percentages. Well, I have 0.25 for action. Then for drama, I have 0.325. All right, and then for science fiction, I have 0.003. And then for comedy, I have 0.392. Well, when I look at these, which one is bigger? All right, so I'm not going to predict that it's action because that's not the largest number that I see. All right, because that's like a quarter. This is like 33 cents. This is like 3 cents, and this is almost 40 cents. So that means if I pick a female, I would predict that she's going to like comedy. Okay. All right, let's go to number 14. All right, number 14 says, if knowing the value of one of the variables provides information about the value of the other variable, then there is an association between the two variables. Is there an association between the variables gender and movie preference? All right. Well, when you look at your information, look how much it varies. None of these are the same. So that means that we would conclude that there is an association. Okay. All right. Number 15 says, what can be said when two variables are associated? Read the following sentences. Decide if each sentence is a correct statement based upon your survey. And if it's not right, tell us why. All right. So number A says, more females than males participated in the survey. Well, you can go back to your original data and see that you had 240 girls and 160 boys. So that is correct. All right. B says males tend to prefer action and science fiction movies. Okay. Well, if we look at science fiction and the action, all right, and we're going to look at this table here. Which one do you see where we have bigger numbers for the boys? All right, well, that's like 16 cents. That's 20 cents. That's 1 cent. That's 0.62 or 63 cents. So then that means this is correct because we have the largest numbers in action for boys and in science fiction. Okay. And now for C, it says, being female causes one to prefer drama movies. Well, let's look at it. Is that totally true? No, not necessarily, because if you look, being a female tends to have more of a comedy. They like more comedy. All right. All right, and here we go. All right, we're at our lesson summary, which is probably one of my favorite parts about Eureka. All right, so I want you guys to make sure you read through this. If you see any vocabulary that you need to copy into your math composition books, please do so. Very important for you to do. Right now, your job is to complete this problem set and upload it to Google Classroom. And I will see you next time. Let me know if you have any questions, and let me know if you prefer this video or if you'd like me to just upload the lessons from YouTube. All right. Bye, guys.